Hello, and welcome to another episode of That 60s Recording Podcast, the podcast that has conversations inspired by the golden era of recording. I'm really aware that my voice flipped during that intro. I've been working up some tracks for this project called Jammin' Player, which you can go and check out. You may have noticed that a lot of the isolated drum stems I've been sending out have not been Beatles of late. They've been other artists too, and that's because I've been putting these tracks together for Jammin' Player. Anyway, yesterday I had to sing quite a few songs, and a lot of them were very high, especially House of the Rising Sun by the Animals. Oh my goodness, that is high. So my voice is feeling it today. It's a little bit croaky, and I can't stop these little vocal flips from happening. So I'm gonna have to take it easy today, I think, and put my feet up and have a beer. Anyway, we'll just crack on. So this is part 2 of my conversation with Liam Gough of the Teskey Brothers. It's been such an enjoyable conversation. We talked for quite a long time after this finished, as is always the case. And I can't wait for them to come back over to the UK so that we can sort of meet in person. He's been such an interesting person to speak to. So we'll just get straight in. Here we go. Part 2 of my conversation with Liam Gough. Let's talk about your studio setup. I've seen what I've seen on Instagram, and that's kind of as far as my knowledge goes. So, do you want to talk us through? Maybe it might be interesting to start from the first piece of gear that you can remember buying, and then take us through the rabbit hole that is home studios.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe not the first piece of recording gear, but I mean, I grew up with my parents' record collections, and they had really strong record collections because they were part of record clubs when they were kids. And I would make mixtapes on my Sony cassette Walkman. And so that sort of was like my first thing. CDs were in, but I didn't have CDs because, you know, they cost a mint. And I had a Walkman, so I'd make mixtapes. And so that's sort of my first experience of, I guess, of like doing stuff with audio. And then, of course, went down through the digital realm and bought a digital interface and sort of did that, then realized that, no, I actually want to, analog was really coming back. And so I bought a Tascam 4-track cassette deck and was recording drums for the bands I played in, because I was playing in 6-7 bands before the Teskey Brothers took off. So for different acts, I was recording drums in my bedroom, in a share house in Fitzroy in Melbourne. And it sort of pushed the limits of what I could do with a 4-track.
What setup were you using for that, mic-wise?
Basically a modified Glyn Johns technique. Only had four mics to work with. Sometimes, 2 condensers, sort of Glyn Johns style, either a snare or a kick, and then a room. It had a hallway, and so I'd go get a distant room mic in this stairwell of this old 2-story house.
Amazing.
So just really having a lot of freedom to muck around with that sort of stuff. And then I heard of
Sorry, I'm jumping in here because this is stuff I'm really interested in. I mean, drum-wise, that teaches. It's got to teach balance. You know, I don't know how, you know, I'm sure you feel the same, but my playing changes. Well, it actually doesn't change too much, but since I've done a lot more studio work, my playing has adjusted to playing more in the studio. I mean, I play a lot more in the studio than I do live now, and my live playing is different as a result of the studio. But I can tell I've had to adapt the way that I play. The more you hear the nuances of how loud your hi-hat is, or how hard you've hit that crash cymbal, or where the toms fit, you know, within the balance of a fill or whatever. That minimal mic setup is you have no choice but to be well balanced, because you can't individually pull the faders up yourself. You have to, you know, your arms and legs are the faders.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about recording yourself, and the feedback you get is you're set with these challenges to try and fix things. And if you're playing the instrument and then you're listening back and you're adjusting, I think it must have helped me. I've had a few engineers Sam and other engineer we work with in Melbourne now, Anzai, who's like this wizard of analog. He's originally from Japan, and he, worked in Japan through the 70s and 80s on strictly, tape and things like that. And he says it's easy to mix drums with me because I supposedly sort of mix myself. But I think I just had to learn to do that using minimal mics, but also with Sam engineering the first album, most of it is just two Coles 4038s in sort of a Glyn Johns position, not condensers, but ribbon mics. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I would have to go into the control room and go, oh yeah, shoot, the hi-hat's really sticking out, or it's not cutting through, or geez, my ride cymbal is, I've got to stay away from that bell, it's just cutting through too much, learning to mix yourself. And using less microphones creates less phase issues. And there's a lot to be said for room sounds. We'll have, when we're recording, rhythm guitar amp, lead guitar amp, bass amp in the same room. And, all those mics and things put in, wherever they fall, or we might move things around. But there's that bleed between microphones that creates a live sound. And, I guess they're happy accidents a lot of the time. I think recording myself definitely changed something. I wasn't necessarily conscious of it, but it was a good process that I'm glad I went through. I'm still going through.
Well, it never stops, never stops. So, you've got your Tascam and you're recording in your bedroom.
So I wanted to, get a reel-to-reel tape machine, and being not having a huge amount of money as a musician, working part-time as an engineer, because I studied industrial design. I was an industrial designer after school, and then quit that because I wanted to focus on music. So, I didn't want to spend a lot of money on gear, but I saw this early Atari MX 5050 8-track half-inch machine that was in bad condition, up in Sydney, which is about 9 hours drive away. And so I actually bought that for a steal, and I had to go to Sydney to pick up something for someone. So I made a trip of it, and I picked up the Atari, and it took me probably 6 months to fix up and get it all working as it needed to. But that was a really good learning experience as well. And so I've still got that and love that to death. So that kept me going for a long time, and I'd done a bunch of recording of drums and as much as I can do with an 8-track before bouncing it into digital or making a mix. And then more recently, I've picked up an Ampex 440 dedicated 2-track 1/4-inch, and so I've really enjoyed mixing down from the 8-track to the 2-track through this console that I've got that I've cleaned up. It's a Yamaha small sort of late 70s, early 80s Yamaha console. I have also bought I'm upgrading. I probably will keep the 5050, but I'm upgrading to a 16-track 1-inch Tascam machine at the moment also.
Wow,
so
very cool.
That's the next challenge.
There's always a next challenge, isn't there? There's always more, and it never stops. You've got quite a nice selection of outboard things as well. I've noticed. Do you want to talk us through those?
I sort of started off buying some WA273 EQs, which are obviously 1173 clones, and they were really good for learning purposes because they've obviously got EQ, and I didn't have a nice console, so I got 4 channels of those, and that meant that I could send that straight to the tape machine and do a lot of stuff. And they're actually quite clean. And so the next choice for pre's was to get a Sebitron, which is actually Australian made. I'm not sure if many people have heard of them.
I don't know of it, no.
Yeah, look it up on the internet. Sebitron's not on Instagram, unfortunately. But they're made up in, I think, Brisbane, up north from here in Australia. And the one I got, which is a lot of people are using on drums and all sorts of things, is a 4-channel VMP 4000E. And it's quite a simple unit, but I just love it. Part of me wants to get another 4 channels of those Valve mic pre's, so I can have 8 of them to when I'm doing remote sessions and things like that, because I just love pumping the drums through them. And they don't have a huge amount of choice. They've only got a 3-stage input gain, and a few different basic settings that I just love. Again, the simplicity of it. There's not that many options. So love that. And I'm also loving the WA76 compressors. I've got a pair of them for doing stuff. And loving... I really like trying to emulate some of these heavily compressed stereo drum overhead sounds that I think I was inspired by. There's a Swedish psychedelic band from, I think they got together in the 90s, called Dungen.
Okay, no, I don't know them.
And some of their drum sounds, they sound like... It's basically where Kevin Parker got his sound for Tame Impala from. He was a big Dungen fan. Yeah. So... if you go listen to some of that, the toms are really ringing and they sort of sound like a bebop sort of jazz tuning, but the compression on those is like pretty far out. But for psychedelic music, it's really, really cool. So I have a lot of fun experimenting with that kind of stuff. And then, I don't have that much outboard gear, but
How do you balance when you're doing remote sessions? How do you balance the sort of going in essentially to whatever you're recording to? I mean, obviously you've got to send stems, so it will end up being digital at some stage. The commitment side of it to what is going on the other end. So, my constant battle is how much can I process this to taste without going so far that it restricts what's happening at the other end. And depending on who I'm working with, I know I can go further or less far. I have to keep it. If I think someone else is going to mix this and I don't know who it is, then maybe I won't commit too much. Whereas if I know, then I'll maybe I'll only send. My favorite is when they go, just send me 4 mics, it's fine. And I'm like, yes, brilliant. I love it. And I'll have all the stems there separately, but just send them a little folder of just my favorite mics in. And that's my favorite sort of thing to have. But how does that work for you? How do you balance all of that?
Yeah, it sounds much the same. You speak to whoever you're recording for and try and get a gauge of whether they have trust in what you're doing. And if you've got strong references and a strong idea of what they're going for, you can shoot for that. But, it's always a mix of recording, the multi-tracks just straight to digital through some outboard gear, or, going to the 8-track and then bouncing directly straight off the repro head into the DAW so that, everything stays in time. But, there's monitoring constraints working that way. But, it's always just has to be a discussion with the people you're working for, and just try and satisfy what they're looking for with whatever way. If you've got to do backflips or somersaults, you do what you got to do to try and to get the project where it needs to go.
So is most of the... everything you're doing kind of with your tape machines and sort of working to your 2-track, is that sort of mostly your demos that you're making yourself? Is that stuff that you're doing for you, or does that have a place in your remote working too?
It does as well, yeah. Some people will put the trust in, getting essentially a stereo drum mix or something like that. Mm-hmm. But, also if I record eight channels to the 8-track and then bounce that down to the 2-track Ampex, I can always go back and do different bounces and amendments. So it all depends on time and communication, and I really enjoy it. I mean, it's a hell of a lot of fun for me. So I don't mind making amendments and going, oh yeah, I'll just spend a bit of time on this today and wait till I get some feedback and then chug along with it, because time between touring and other things, working with the Teskey Brothers, it's all, I really enjoy spending it working on other things. And I find that working on someone else's creative project will spur creativity for me as well. So I just feel really lucky to be able to do all this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. I agree with you completely. Working on somebody else's music is creativity in a different. It's a different way of doing it, really, and it's I enjoy that little bit of sort of butterflies almost when you send something that you know has pushed the boundaries, and you kind of. I always send a little email and I've said something along the lines of like this. Just brace yourself because this is not quite what you expected, but I think you might like it. And if you don't like it, that's absolutely fine. But I love that feeling of I think this is really cool. See what you think.
Yeah, and sometimes you just have to present things with confidence and believe in them, because it doesn't matter how good it is. If you sort of send something to someone and say, "Oh, look, I'm really not sure," or don't get freaked out by it. It puts them in the mindset of going, "Oh," and maybe they're not. If it's drum tracks, maybe their strongest thing is making judgments on what's a good drum track and things, and they're paying you for a sound and your ear, and so yeah, I think. Sometimes you've got to find the confidence to really believe in something and put it forward. And you can always get told no, hopefully.
Exactly. I think that's probably the biggest lesson in music, isn't it? Like just be able to accept no.
Yeah.
Have you got a preferred sort of mic setup? I mean, I think you may have seen the way that I work is I have lots of mics on the kit and I send lots of options, but I have. In my mind, I always default to the same, same kind of things each time. Even though there's so many options there, there's a handful that I quite like the sound of that seems to be my favourite. How does that work for you? Have you got a preferred setup that you like?
It depends. If we're going for certain sounds, I'll try and I'll have an idea of how to maybe get that sound. But a lot of it, my go-to starting positions is often a modified Glyn Johns, but with 2 ribbons. If I need a tighter sound, 2 condensers, and then go from there. And a lot of it is the sound of the drums themselves and the sound of the room itself. So I've been working on a session for an Australian artist, and it was sort of an early to mid 70s sounding thing. So I popped the bottom heads off and got the chamois out and put them over the drums and got quite a dead sort of tight 70s sound from the same sort of mic technique as a modified sort of Glyn Johns. So and I don't particularly want to have too many choices. I'll often for remote sessions have 421s on the toms as an option, but if I was doing it for myself, I'd try and make it work without having all those mics. Try and get away with a 4 mic setup or 4 mics and maybe a room mic depending on sound. I love room mics and I love ribbons. The figure 8 pattern of a ribbon, getting really creative, really thinking about where the back of the microphone is pointing and trying to visualize what's going on with that. I'm a big fan of ribbon mics. For the Teskey Brothers stuff, with majority of the drum sounds you'll hear, and on other instruments as well, is the Coles 4038. So I've got a pair of clones that are made by an Australian guy. It's called Open Plan Recording, OPR. Okay. And so I bought a set of 4038 clones from him, which have, I think they're 0.4 micron or 0.6 micron ribbons, which is, I think most ribbon microphones are about 4 microns thick. So 0.6 microns is an extremely thin and sensitive ribbon. So, if anyone that's worked with the Coles 4038s, like they're just the most amazing sounding ribbons, in my opinion.
I love. I have one, and I absolutely love it. It's that is the one that I always default to. It sort of controls the cymbals so well. It's got that sound that I'm so familiar with, and it's beautiful. I absolutely love it. I'd love to. I'll have another one day, and then I'll have a nice stereo pair. Yeah, but one day. But I think going back to what you were saying about starting with a Glyn Johns setup, I think that probably would surprise a lot of the people that I work with. I use pretty much the same kit on everything. I change the snare out and the cymbals out. But I did an EP for somebody a couple of weeks ago, and every track had almost the same setup on it, but they all sound different. And it's to do with the way that I'm playing, because different songs in sight are different. Hit the drums slightly harder or with a different sort of attitude depending on what the feel of the song is. Essentially, I think that's really important as drummers. So much of it boils down to what we do and the way that the kit sounds and the way the way that we approach the music. It's not necessarily the mics. The mics are just there to sort of capture that essentially.
Definitely. And you put two different drummers behind the same kit, they're going to sound different. You ask them to play the same rhythm or the same tune, they're going to sound different. So that's the magic.
No, yeah, 100%. Do you find having your own space, you understand it and you understand your drums and you understand the way that you play to such a sort of intricate level that really helps with all of that? You kind of... I end up thinking in the studio, I almost don't know how the drums sound in the room. I know how they sound through the room mics. I can picture things. I'm always thinking through microphones almost. And I know the sound of everything quite well. I imagine it's the same for you.
Yeah, I guess once you get it dialed in, I'm just scared of getting stuck in habits and that might end up being a limitation or something. But if people like the sound, then that's good. And if people are coming to you because they like that sound, like they are for your drum tracks, then don't change anything unless you need to. If it's not broken, don't fix it.
No, but I mean, I guess it helps that when you're recording stuff for artists, that you must know the way that your room sounds and how to dial in a sound that's going to fit that track for you quite well. Just because it's a room that and you're playing in your kits.
Yeah, I think that's a huge benefit, and the longer I spend in this room with this gear, the more refined I guess it gets, to the point where you want to change something and try something different.
Yeah, buy a new machine.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I've testing out a Warm Audio WA-47 tube mic, which has been really fun, and mucking around with a mono overhead using that. Or another favorite position for drums is sort of behind the drummer's back or bottom or the back of the head. There's something that's one of my favorite single mic, mono mic positions. And I'm not sure whether it's because
over there. I've literally just moved I have a mono room and I've just moved mine to behind my head, and it sounds incredible. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You're listening with your ears, and so if you're mixing to that point, why not have a microphone somewhere there? And then if you start sliding it down, behind your back, and you can get more of the beater head skin side coming through the mic, and you can do a lot of mixing just by playing with the height and directionality of a condenser or a ribbon behind you. So that's been really fun.
How'd you get on with that microphone? I've not used one, but I've heard good things about it.
Loving it. I had an engineer put me onto it, and yeah, I was meant to just be sort of road testing it, but I don't think it'll be going back to the shop.
Amazing. I think one's on my list. I've got it doesn't belong to me, so I have to be slightly careful. But I've got the Junior. I think it's a 47 Junior that's at the studio at the minute, and I have to admit I'm not in the habit of being negative about things, but I don't get on with it particularly well. It sounds a bit flat to me, but I'm hoping that, from what I've heard from friends of mine who've got it, the sort of grown-up version, like you have, seems to be worth its salt and have a bit more sort of life about it.
Yeah, it's slight. Supposedly, from what I understand, it's slightly darker than a lot of the other 47 clones, but I like that so far. So, but I haven't had a lot of other 47 things to compare it to. So yeah, but it seems to be working for me, and I like the sound of it.
Nice. I want to geek out about kits. What drums have you got?
I sort of grew up as a Rogers guy. My dad was a drummer and played in bands, and he actually picked me up a secondhand Rogers kit when I was probably 12, I think, for not much money at all. And that sort of started my love for Rogers. And then I've been, collecting and building up Rogers kits. But I kind of have, a bunch of American 60s three-ply drums, Rogers, Slingerland, and Ludwig mostly. So, thin, mostly maple poplar shells with reinforcing rings, and I can't sort of move away from that sort of sound and feel.
How would you, I mean, I already know what you're going to say, but how would you describe that sound? What is it about that era of drums that works for you?
I think it's the lightweight and the responsiveness. You know, you don't have to hit them too hard to get them sort of resonating, whereas thicker, more modern shells, I think, you know, as they were developed through the 90s and things, people were playing harder and that sort of worked. But I've never, they haven't really resonated with me as a player. And there's something I think about the reinforcing rings, and you get the really fat round over edges that transfers a lot of resonance from the head to the shell, which also potentially mutes the drum a bit more. But I don't know. I mean, is it just that they're beautiful objects and, you know,
maybe
that we feel comfortable because we know that majority of recordings were done, you know, in the 60s and 70s on these sort of American-made kits and English-made kits. There's beautiful Premier, Beverly. You've got a Beverly, don't you?
I do, yeah. It's a very similar finish to the one you've got behind you, actually. It's
cool.
Yeah, I think it's called Gold Viking. It's funny. I don't know if you've seen sort of a Beverly kit with that sort of finish up close before, but it almost looks, you know, on the beach you get worms that kind of come up through the beach and leave those little trails. It looks like indents of that, but on the kit, it's almost like a negative impression. It's really interesting. I'd never seen a finish like it, but I know I think Premier did a short run of them, and Beverly had a few kits that had that finish. Yeah, I love it. It's I have to admit, when I got my Ludwig is an early 70s, and when I put that up, that felt like the Beverly on steroids. But the Beverly is still got there's a place for it for me. I love it. It's such a nice kit.
Definitely, and so many amazing drummers played on amazing recordings that played on English-made kits. You know, the are they birch shells with beech reinforcing rings?
I think they're mahogany.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. I also like the fact that Beverly is just down the road in Yorkshire from me. You know, it's actually a village that's. I mean, when I say down the road, it's about sort of 25, 30 miles. But I mean, in Australia, that is down the road.
That is down the road.
Yeah. But yeah, I love the fact that it was that, you know, they will have come from just down there, and now they have a place here. It's and I'm in the process of building up a second room at my space so I can have them up permanently, because at the minute they're just sort of stacked, and it's sad to see them not being used, and I want to use them.
Definitely, drums deserve to be played.
Yeah, 100%. I do. Maybe there is some kind of nostalgia about them, or like confidence that we know that a lot of those records have these drums on, so you just want to play like that.
Totally. I remember when I was in uni, I walked into a music store and I wanted to buy a fluffy beater, like the old, you know, the sort of jazz style lamb's wool beaters. And I remember talking to the guy in the shop, and he was really lovely. And I sort of said, "Oh, yeah, I want to buy this thing." And he's like, "Oh," and I'm sort of trying to talk. I'm questioning whether I should talk myself out of it. Like, is this stupid? And he's like, "No, man. If that makes you feel good, that's going to make you play a certain way, and that's probably a good thing. So just do it, you know. It doesn't matter if it makes you feel good, then you should do it." And you know, it's nice to the drums I have make me want to get on them and play them and see what sounds I can get out of them. I feel inspired by these things, and I'm really lucky to have a collection of vintage drums. Yeah, it definitely helps me for whatever reason, I'm not sure.
Snare-wise, do you have specific snares that you keep coming back to, or do you, as always, I sort of, from my perspective, I have sort of 3 snares that I know do certain jobs that I tend to go back to a lot, and then I've got a lot of flavor snares that I know do very specific things very well. Snare wise, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, from doing a lot of recording with other engineers, we do snare shootouts, and Sam's studio that we record at, you can't see from the control room to the tracking room, so they can't see what snare you're pulling up. And early on in the recordings, we did a bunch of shootouts. I think I brought 10 snare drums of different varying things, and we'd always end up with a 5-inch deep, either Superphonic or Rogers Super 10, or a Slingerland Gene Krupa 10-lug snare. And it was just like, so it's either, a metal 5-inch deep snare seemed to always get picked by whoever was in the control room. Then I'd go listen, and, they wouldn't know what snare I was putting up, but that's the sound they wanted. And different studios, different engineers, that seems to be what people pick. But I've got a bunch of wooden snares, from the 60s and 70s for different sounds, which I really love using. But for some reason, when I get asked to go to a studio and record drums, a lot of the time it's, the most recorded snares in history. Yeah.
There's just something about it. I think it must be what people default. That's in their mind's eye. That's what a snare sounds like.
Well, that's it. What came first, the chicken or the egg? But I've got some really fun snares. I've got it must be a 7 or 8-inch deep 60s Ludwig, Premier snare that is actually really amazing. Really sort of, I can get a lot of different sounds out of that one snare, and I love playing it. So, but yeah. I used to have a huge multitude of snares, and I sort of sold some off because I was sort of realized that I can get the sounds I need from, I don't know, the 8 or so snares maybe 10 snares I have nowadays.
I love that. 8, maybe 10. Probably more like 12. Yeah, I'm similar position really. I actually sold a couple of snares so I could buy some more outboard stuff, because it was the same. There was a couple that were worth quite a lot of money that were just sat on the shelf, and when I first bought them, they were a bit novelty. I had a 1942 Ludwig and Ludwig, so before it became just Ludwig, and it was what do they call that finish now? I'm not very good at sort of drum nerdery too much, but where the finish sort of fades in and out of itself. What's that called?
Juco.
Juco, that's it.
Juco, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And it was beautiful. It was such a pretty drum, but it just didn't get used. And, so I sold it off and bought some preamps instead, and and they get used.
The cycle continues.
It does. Oh, man, it's never ending. I just spent a few £100 on power conditioners for the studio, which was a really exciting purchase to buy. Not, but it will be. They're important. It's
totally.
Yes, it is just never ending. It's never ending, and my poor wife just has to open the door and accept packages through the door, and she doesn't even question it anymore. She's just, well, he says he needs it, so he must need it. Yeah.
It's all for your business, isn't it?
Precisely, it's tax deductible. Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah.
So, a couple of last things that I'd like to ask you. It's first of all, what are you listening to that, in terms of sort of maybe not necessarily influencing your work with the Teskey Brothers, but in terms of, you've mentioned a couple of bands already that I'll link to, and that what I've already found them, Dungan. I'm going to check them out. But yeah, what else are you listening to right now that is that you'd recommend people check out?
I mean, I'll listen to all sorts of stuff. My girlfriend's actually, she's got a lot of, she's lived in Turkey and Italy and all over the place. So she's been showing me a lot of really interesting music, a lot from the 60s and 70s, from North Africa and stuff.
Oh, cool.
I've been getting into Fela Kuti again. I sort of go through phases, and Afrobeat and Tony Allen and stuff. So, all sorts of stuff. Lounge music from America in the late 50s, early 60s and stuff. Garage music from America, like there's a band, the OCs, from San Francisco that do this. John Dwyer is the front man, and he just keeps churning out amazing albums of 60s inspired sort of heavy garage stuff. But I love listening to just about everything, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned sort of lounge music. I've been sent references a couple of times really recently of these, sort of 70s library music albums and late 60s library music albums. And they seem to be having a little bit of a resurgence. You can't buy the CDs of them anywhere. They're all just on YouTube. I think people have uploaded the vinyls onto YouTube, and that seems to be the only place you can find them. And the records themselves cost hundreds and hundreds of pounds. They're so rare. But yeah, it's all of those sort of top session players from the late 60s and early 70s who just sort of absolutely smashed it on these TV soundtracks and background music like Carol Kay on bass and all these amazing musicians. And the music's brilliant. I'm loving digging into that at the minute.
Yeah, and a lot of it's instrumental as well, so it's like there's room for more exploration. You're not bound to working around a vocal. But yeah, that strange exotica that was in films from the 60s and things, those soundtrack sort of things that are just really interesting.
Yeah, agreed. Finally, if you were to give some advice to somebody who's sort of beginning their journey into, say they've got a decent digital interface and they're looking to start the journey into to sort of integrating more of a either analog mindset or actual analog gear, sort of outboard gear into their setup, what would you advise from your experience would be a nice place to start or sort of an approach, a beginning approach for it?
I think maybe sort of less is more. The temptation is to jump in and buy a bunch of gear and, for recording something that you can record with multiple microphones like I started with drums and things. It's almost more beneficial to start with one mic or two mics and keep it simple and see what limitations you can work within and getting different sounds, really focus on mic placement, things like that, capturing the source rather than, make sure it sounds good straight off the bat before you start piling on plugins and doing wild EQing and things. So I think when I started, I was like, there must be a hell of a lot more stuff that has to go on to this audio to make it good. And it's like, well, good is subjective. If it sounds good to me or if it sounds good to the person that's listening to it, then maybe it is good. So, having the confidence to keep it simple, I think, is a good way to learn.
To build on that slightly, I think that I completely sympathise with that. There must be a lot more that happens, but actually, what seems to be happening for me is the further into this process I get, the more the bigger the changes come from the smaller adjustments. So moving a mic a tiny little bit can change the EQ and save you having to put an EQ on, or just sorting your gain staging out. And I think that's where the misconception of more stuff needs to happen comes from. More stuff, you could say more things do need to happen, but those things are actually tiny little placement things or gain staging things. And I think that you mentioned constraints and seeing what restrictions you can put on yourself. How could you just articulate how that encourages better quality or more creativity in your opinion?
Maybe it improves focus if you're focusing on fewer things. If you've got fewer bands of EQ. I think that for me, learning through having those constraints, working with a 4-track cassette machine, and I only had 2 condensers to begin with, and I think it can really leave room for creativity and learning if you just don't have too many options. It's like a cafe. You go to a cafe, if they've got 40 different meals on the menu, it's overwhelming. And do they really do any of them really well? I want to go to a cafe that has 2 things on the menu because I know they're going to do them really well.
Exactly. That's a very good way of putting it. Thanks so much for speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Joe, for having me on. I'm loving the podcast and I can't wait to keep listening.
Thanks, man. Where can people find you? You're on Instagram.
I'm on Instagram at Liam Gough Drums. That's LIAM GOUGH Drums. So then you can catch that and look up the Teskey Brothers at the Teskey Brothers on Instagram. That's TESKEY. And we've got a website and a mailing list. And jump on and have a look.
Are you planning? I know you guys are still in lockdown there, but have you got plans for touring next year, perhaps?
Yeah, so I think early next year we're planning to do a run around Australia if we can with the 40-piece orchestra behind us, which is terrifying but also amazing. But we'll be getting back to Europe and the States as soon as we can. We'd spent 3.5 years touring Europe and the States flat out, and it's a big market for us in the UK and Holland and Germany and all around the States and Canada. So as soon as we can do it safely, we'll be back touring again.
Amazing. Look forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. As I've said countless times, such a lovely guy, and he's got such a cool approach to recording, and it's just that it just sums up. I feel a bit of a kinship with him because it sums up my attitude towards this as well, and it seems to be the way that the world's moving and what this whole podcast is about. You know, it's really interesting that I get to speak with producers and engineers that were around in the 60s, but that doesn't mean anything necessarily unless it's related to all of us listening, really, and all of us who are sort of making music now and how their past experiences can influence the way that we make music. And I think Liam seems to typify everything that this podcast stands for and the approach to music that I dearly love, and is clearly producing outstanding results, as you can hear in the Teskey Brothers albums, and his drumming style. It's all just so musical. I love it. So I encourage you to go and check out those albums. I'm really into it personally. It's the kind of music that I really, really adore, sort of Motown soul inspired Americana. Aside from, you know, all of the sort of Beatlesy style stuff I love. But go and check those albums out, if not least just to hear the way that they sound, given now how you know that they were recorded, and hopefully listen to them with a set of ears that is freshly informed. So you can do that. Hopefully they'll be back touring next year. You can check out their website, as Liam mentioned, and also Liam is on Instagram at Liam Gough Drums. You can also get in touch with me. My email address is joe@allyouneedisdrums. I'm also on Instagram at allyouneedisdrums, or you can hear my daughter shrieking outside the door. So I better speed this outro up. I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, send me a message. And if you want to support the podcast, you can do that by buying a mug from my website, allyouneedisdrums.com. And there is a link to the shop there. Thank you so much to everybody that has bought a mug already. I really appreciate the support. And I'll be back next week. So a huge thanks to Rory for editing and uploading the podcast, to Joe Kane for the intro and outro music, and to David Henshaw for the artwork he supplies. Have a fantastic week, and I will be back next Tuesday. Goodbye!